The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at his left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, 'Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?' And the king will answer them, 'Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me.' Then he will say to those at his left hand, 'You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.' Then they also will answer, 'Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or in prison and did not take care of you?' Then he will answer them, 'Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me.' And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." The Gospel of the Lord. As a Basilian, when I was at a seminarian and all that, and religious orders around the world, or at least in North America, we tend to take these different personality tests or whatever, so that to kind of understand ourselves better and to understand those we live with, because we live in community, and unlike married couples, we don't choose each other, and sometimes we end up living with people that are hard to live with. I know it's hard to believe that any of us could be hard to live with. And for me, I learned about myself one day that I tend to be, I'm kind of in the category of people they call a helper. And I'm always ready to help other people. And I knew that. But then the test said, and I tend to keep lists. I remember I did this for you, and that for you, and that for you. And what have you done for me? How come you haven't done anything for me? And I kind of cringed inside. It was like, how do they know that about me? I love to help other people, but I sure want to make sure that they know I helped them. And they know how much it cost me. And they know all of these kind of things like that. So when I'm honest with myself, I think when I hear a gospel like today, instead of responding like the ones that Jesus is right hand, I would hope that Jesus would say, welcome, because you helped me. I was sick and I was thirsty and I was in prison, because I do all those things. But I tend to think that I would respond, well, thank God you finally acknowledged that. I'm glad you recognize that I did all those things for you. Now, that's my default mode. You can grow beyond it, and that's another reason that we take these kind of personality surveys, is to learn how we act so that we can improve as well and go beyond sometimes our gut or our default reactions. But I think that's a very important aspect of today's gospel reading, is the reaction of both the ones that Jesus right and the ones that Jesus left. The ones who helped him and who didn't help him. The ones who didn't help him, I am quite sure that they would say, if we ever saw you hungry, Jesus, we would help you in a second. We just never saw you hungry. We saw all those other people, but we never saw you hungry. And the ones on his right hand, what does he say? Or what did they say? What was their reaction? Well, Jesus, when did we ever do this for you? We didn't do anything for you. All we did was we saw somebody, they were hungry, they needed food, so we gave them food. But they were thirsty, so we gave them something to drink. I mean, wouldn't you do the same thing, Jesus? And that's what we're called to be. Not to recognize necessarily Jesus in the other person, but to help the other person because the other person needs our help, period. Without expecting a reward, or not because we think it's God, or not because whatever, but just because it's the right thing to do. So many ways in which we can help other people because it's the right thing to do. Just because they need our help. And in a sense, that's what Jesus says is the key to whether we choose to come into salvation or whether we choose to be rejected, is whether or not we help others. And kind of the funny thing is they don't recognize that it's Jesus in that, and yet St. Paul says that in the end, God is all in all. So what Jesus is doing is kind of anticipating the final reality. Of course you did it for me, because God is all in all. And God is in each one of us who are created in his image and likeness, who are filled with his presence as we are baptized, those of us who are Christian, those of us who receive communion, who are filled with his sacramental presence. God is there. My prayer and my hope is that we, in a sense, recognize him, and yet that can be at the back of our mind. But that we may learn to help one another, not necessarily because we're expecting a reward, but because they're in need, because they are our sisters and brothers. As Pope Francis reminds us in this latest encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, the Italian. He kept the Italian title in all the different languages because he's quoting from St. Francis of Assisi, saying we're all sisters and brothers, children of the one Father in heaven, who one day will indeed be all in all.